Thank you, Lindy. I hope you're feeling a little more energized. Okay, so let's jump right in. And I'm going to pose all my questions to both of you, although sometimes I'll push one of you on an answer. What do you think makes universities and schools and education, just education, higher education, other places in education, so hard to change, to challenge rape culture? We're seeing all over the country, but we're also seeing all over the world an explosion, it seems, in kind of universities, kind of rigidity, explosion of kind of movements against rape, but also a consistent resistance by universities and other education systems to act in ways that help us dismantle rape culture. What is it? And yet, very often when I talk to people about kind of sexual harassment or sexual violence or racial violence, racial harassment and rape culture on campuses, many people who live their lives fully outside the academy say things like, "Really? But the academy, you would think that on the site, at the site that is supposed to be about transformative knowledge making and building, that there would be less of a commitment to such kind of violent hierarchy." What do you think that's about?
Well, I think just to add to the point you made about when people say, really, the academy, I think about 2 years ago when I started speaking on campus about sexual violence, I think I did a UCT radio interview, and like standing outside for a jammy shuttle home, I spoke to someone that I just met, and he was like, "Really, that happens here?" So that's the first sort of barrier that you have to get past in terms of dealing with it in higher education institutions, because it's elite spaces, and people say, especially with sexual violence, "Oh, but that happens in the townships, or that happens here, but it doesn't happen here." But this is an educated space. And I think the other big barrier is obviously universities are very much concerned with their reputation. So in order to actually deal with a problem or tackle an issue, you have to admit that the issue exists. And it took so long, just in my 2 years here, but it hasn't just been my 2 years. I have a friend who was at UCT 20 years ago, and she's come back to do her master's. And she said, 20 years ago I was marching. In 1993 I was marching, you know, for an office to deal with sexual harassment and to deal with sexual assault. And it broke her heart that in 2016 she's again at a protest 20 years later, and we're still talking about the same issues.
Well, I think the way in which society looks at rape, you know, it's something that nobody wants to talk about. It's one of those topics that everybody wants to sweep under the rug. And it makes it very difficult because, like as Dela just said, that our institutions, they always try to protect their image. They try to protect the colonialist policies that they're still using, where they protect the perpetrators more than the victims, and there's no support for victims. And you find yourself in a space where you just don't know what to do, you know. And like, I mean, we've seen what happened at Rhodes, where women decided to just like take off their tops, and that's the only time then people were like, "Oh yeah, well, we can start talking about it," but it's not the right time for you to do this. The fact that people are always trying to push the conversation away because it makes them uncomfortable. I think that's where we need to start the conversation, making people feel uncomfortable, talking about this issue as much as we can, so that people can start like realizing and finding ways of how we can deal with rape culture in institutions.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I both of what you're saying resonates. You know, I was at UCT, and I remember some of those marches, some of that work, some of those campaigns, and it's often frustrating to look, you know, or to be at vets and have colleagues and friends who are doing similar work, or at UWC or Forte or at UKZN, although in our day it was called UNP and UND, and so on, and to think about often the pain of how little success many of these kind of previous movements have had. Are you hopeful?
At this point, I think the space that we're sitting in, first, is problematic. It's an issue of access. Who are these dialogues for? You know, why are we talking about rape culture in a space of people who are mostly academics and they already know this information, and the people who really need these conversations are out there in our communities. But like they're not getting this information, and we're sitting right here and we're having these talks over and over. When are we going to start acting? I feel like I'm so tired of like talking all the time to people who know exactly what rape culture is and how we can find ways to dealing with it, but they're not doing anything, you know, like we just like either become Twitter activists, talk about it, remember crazy, hashtag remember crazy, all of us, and then when that is died down and then we start, there's another protest. We just become like reactionary activists. In our struggle, we always pick up an issue when it's lit, and then when it goes down, then we stop talking about it and we forget. So, what is the point?
Do you really believe, though, that academics know? I mean, I'm just thinking, I'm working in an institution where there was a very public explosion of sexual harassment, and we know that kind of sexual harassment and rape is deeply, deeply entrenched at universities. And I'm not talking students only, talking colleagues. Some of whom, you know, have had to be fired, some of whom will never be fired because there's such success in intimidating complainants. So is it true that academic or kind of theatre going and festival attending audiences really know something more and are more committed to ending rape culture? Or if they know what to do to dismantle rape culture, they... Can we let them off?
No, we can't. Because last year when Patriarchy Must Fall started at DCT, after Rose Must Fall, we were very shocked that towards the end of the year, there were people, when we were protesting at Leo Market residents, there were boys who were asking us, like, what are you talking about? What is rape culture? What is patriarchy? You know, it's very troubling to find people in a university space who have access to these things, but are not using those resources to actually educate themselves. And then the people who really need this and do not have the access, what about them? So it's like a this and us and them situation. Academics and most of the people in the room might know about what rape culture is and what we can do because they've got access to internet. They've got access to libraries where they can read about those things. But what are you doing after you read about it?
I feel like academics don't particularly know either. I had a case this year of challenging an academic on how he teaches Lolita, which is a book where someone is sexually abused. And survivors are coming to me and saying it's so uncomfortable being in this person's class, and that they're anti-feminist and that they're very flippant and they trivialize the sexual abuse that happens in the book. And when I challenged this person, they dismissed me and said, I'm not promoting rape. That's what they said. I was saying, I don't know what you're talking, what is rape culture? I'm not promoting rape. So I think there's this unwillingness to especially particularly deal with this issue. And I think that particular person was like